This is the day the Lord hath made. Shall we not rejoice and be glad in it? This is Ruth Polston, The Life That Wins. I'm delighted to be with you. Times that song has been sung and probably brought a lot of people into the kingdom. Amazing Grace. Well, I'm sure glad that the Lord visited me with Amazing Grace. Well, what I'd like to talk to you tonight is, what level are you on? We all have levels, and I think our levels change. The Bible says in Romans that we go from faith to faith and from glory to glory. So we don't ever step in the same river twice. So what I would like to share with you tonight, and I'll draw an illustration of my own level. When I was about pre-teens, I think, I was just coming home from a youth camp. And if you've ever been to a Christian youth camp, usually you come home all fired up and you just think you're spiritual. Nobody's ever been as spiritual as you are, you know. Well, all of a sudden, I went past my high school. And I remember so much that I looked at that high school and whether I said it out loud or whether I just thought it, I sure wish God went to high schools. Well, it sounds sort of ridiculous, really, because there's no place that God is not. But it never occurred to me that He would be out there if I was cheerleading. He would be out there if I was singing in anything, or speaking, whatever it was. He was in with me in my classes. That didn't occur to me. No, God was in youth camp. But I just wished he'd go to high school. Well, I sort of had him pigeonholed. And that's quite characteristic. And so my mother was probably the best Christian I knew around anywhere, and that's true. And then I got to think about my mother's friends. There was Mrs. Wade and Mrs. Smith, and there was Mr. Smith, who used to come to see us from Moody Bible Institute. He was so much a part of our lives, and he would come every 2 weeks. And he was on the board there, so I had a lot of people that I had pigeonholed. They were great kids, but God didn't go to high school. So as I have been thinking a lot about it, I thought about Jesus after the crucifixion. What did he do? Well, he started meeting his close friends, and he met them on their level. Now, I don't know what your level is tonight. I don't know what your need is, because Jesus gravitates to need. And so, Let's just look at a few of those people. Did you know the first person that he encountered was Peter? I've read the Bible for years, but I never recognized that the first one, it says, and the Lord appeared to Cephas, which was his other name, Peter. And I got thinking, well, why Peter? Peter denied him. That was why I went to him first. Peter had a lot of making up to do, didn't he? I just will never know what went on in that conversation. But I'm sure there was a lot of tears and a lot of repenting and a lot of forgiveness, because Jesus is in the business of forgiveness. So he met Peter on his level. Okay, who else did he? Well, as soon as they took him off the cross, it was Joseph of Arimathea. Now, he was on the Sanhedrin. It was the Sanhedrin, the religious people, that had put the final touches with Rome to have Jesus crucified. And it must have just grieved his heart terribly. But what he did after Jesus was crucified, the Bible said he went to Pilate and he begged the body of Jesus. Isn't that lovely? He begged the body of Jesus. So I'm just taking it for granted that there was a wrapping and a cleansing and a preparation and linen cloths and all those other things that went along with the burial. And then he opened up his own tomb. Then, who did he go to for then? Well, now that it's over with, the women, the women, they have a special thing to do. And a man doesn't enter into that sort of thing, or maybe he doesn't think it's important, but the women did. They made spices. Now, they knew where the tomb was because they had followed. And so they had the spices already. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and they came, and lo and behold, there was no stone. And so they said, oh. And the men, whether the soldiers that had been sent to take, and for sure, he said, make it as sure as you can. Well, they did make it as sure as they can, but not as sure as God can. So they made it as sure as they can, but God sent an earthquake. You see, God's got everything on his side. He can just call forth anything, and it comes. In creation was made to respond. And they respond after their kind. So here's the women. And they look back, and that stone there was sitting on a side. So it wasn't just an accident who put it up there, and an angel was sitting up there. And you know what they said? It was certainly on their level. That's why they were there. And it said, I know you seek Jesus. He's not here. He is risen. Well, I tell you, I think they ran a marathon that day to get back to where the men were meeting. Now, guess where the disciples? Let's see. He met them on their level. Okay, the women. And now he's going to meet the men on their level. Where are the disciples? They're behind bolted doors. They're still got the shades pulled. They think maybe, just maybe, the magistrates might be coming after them. So they were huddled together like a bunch of scared rabbits. And the women were beating on the door and saying, he's not there. he's risen. He is risen indeed. And they said, oh, you know how women are. They're just kind of, they get frustrated easily. Just idle tales. But there were two of them. Yeah, Peter and John. They said, do you suppose they're right? Boy, I tell you, they bolted out of then, and Peter was a fast runner. He got there first. And John, who was the more sensitive one, he stood back and didn't let Peter go in. And Peter looked around and he said, he's not here. He's not here. There's no angels here either. No. Oh, those women. They were wrong. John, the sensitive one, looked in, walked in, saw a napkin that was folded. He said, nobody left here in a hurry. Huh. A folded napkin. And the Bible said he believed. Well, he knew it was going to take more than a folded napkin to make the disciples believe, so away he went back. All right, now he's met those two men on their level. But you know, there was a couple of them that were in the upper room with them. They were like disciples, but they really weren't disciples, but they were good friends of Jesus. And they were so depressed. They said, you know, I really thought he was the Messiah, didn't you? Yeah, I did too. You know, he did so many wonderful things. Yeah, he sure did. But it's over. I think we might as well get on home. He said, we got about 5 miles to walk. Yeah, I know. And all of a sudden a stranger walks up to them on their level and say, may I ask what you're talking about today? You mean you are from Jerusalem and you don't know what's happened there? Well, we were disciples of Jesus. And we thought, sure, he was going to be the deliverer. We just would have bet our life on it. And so he just let him talk. And then all of a sudden, this stranger began to recite the scriptures. And of course, we already know that was Jesus. And he was meeting them on their level. And so he said, he began to recite scriptures that were about himself. There were a lot in the Old Testament, and they didn't have the New Testament yet. So he was mouthing these in such a way that they were just spellbound. Listen to him. And they said, just when they thought he was going to go on, they said, oh, please stay and have a little sup with us tonight, would you? He said, yes, I will. So he came down and he sat down and he took a piece of bread and he broke it and he gave it to them and disappeared. They said, can you believe it? That was Jesus. He met them on their level of hopelessness, sadness, disappointment, and they ran back to Jerusalem, and they crashed that bolted door and said, Jesus is alive. He just appeared to us on the road to Emmaus. Really? Yeah, he did. Yeah, well, they'd take it from a man a little bit better than they would the women, but that's just the way men are, you know. So anyway, the keepers of the tomb, what about them? Well, I tell you, they got scared so bad, and they had to make up a story. Well, that earthquake, it rolled that stone back, and he wasn't in it. Well, we could always tell Pilate that the disciples stole him, and that's what the religious people were afraid of anyway. So he said that we'll just make up that story. Yeah, but they were like dead men. They were so frightened. That was their level. What's Pilate doing? He's back in his palace. He's still washing his hands. He can't get the guilt because he said, I find no fault in this man. So he had to work against his conscious mind, and they got the job done. Turned him over to that frenzied crowd who were crying, screaming, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, which was ordained in heaven before the foundation of the world. It was God's plan. So here's Pilate. Poor Pilate. I'm sorry for him. His wife even had a dream and said, don't have anything to do. He said with committing that just man. He's a just man. I had a dream about him. So there's Pilate. He was still taking care of his level. Well, okay, we've covered a lot of levels tonight, and I'm thinking that I'm thinking about Thomas. Do you remember Thomas wasn't with them? He was one of the disciples. And when Jesus appeared to all of them, came right through the door, and he said, you said Jesus was here. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't care. I don't care what you say. He said, unless I see myself, the prince, I'm not going to believe it. Just then Jesus came in, and he met Thomas on his level. And he said, Thomas, here's my hand. My Lord and my God. And then he showed him his other wounds, the wounds in his side. He said, put your finger in there, Thomas. Poor Thomas. He said, blessed are those that have not seen, but they believed. And you had to see to believe. It's a little inferior, Thomas, kind of faith, but he said, you believe. And so he let dear old Thomas off the hook. And that's our Lord. Our Lord meets us on the level. Now, I think there's one more we ought to talk about, and that's Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene couldn't give up. She said, I'm going back, she said, to that empty tomb. So she was walking around and said, the gardener, she called him and said, you've taken away my Lord, and if you tell me where you took him, I'll be responsible, I'll take care of him. And Jesus was standing beside her, behind her, and looked at her. First of all, he said, woman. That didn't get her attention. But then he said, Mary. That broke her heart. I know that. Nobody says my name like Jesus. And nobody knows us like Jesus. She fell down at his feet. He said, wait, Mary, I haven't gone to my Father yet. And he said, I must go to my Father first. And so Mary Magdalene, he met her on her level. So whatever your level is tonight, God doesn't hold himself in an obscure matter. No, he comes to your level. Do you have a problem tonight that just doesn't, it just doesn't seem to move? You've prayed, you've cried, you've even beat the floor, but nothing has happened. Don't give up. Jesus will meet you on your level. God bless. Yes, God goes to high school. Oh, I thank him for the levels he's brought in my life, to know that he will never leave me. He will never forsake me. We're in it for the long haul. And many that are listening tonight are in it for the long haul. And if you're not, Jesus wants to meet you on your level. Amazing grace. How sweet